Karen I Shragg will be concerned with this focus on downstream issues that Jeremy's showing there. She's a vegan, a naturalist, a writer and an overpopulation activist. She joined the advisory board of World Population Balance in 2004 and regularly delivers lectures on overpopulation to local, state and national groups. She joins us to discuss her new book.
Hello Karen and welcome to The Species Barrier. Could you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Well, I am a director of a nature center. I am a long-time environmental educator, activist, been a peace activist in my past, starting probably in 10th grade when I had a very great teacher that suggested we might want to strike the school and protest the Cambodian War. That was, if you recall the history of that, there was no indication we had actually gone into Cambodia, and that sort of started me off on a journey of thinking that it was my role in life to sort of try to make the world a better place. And I tried all kinds of things that didn't seem to be working very well. You get up every day and things didn't collectively seem any better. And then in 1991, I met a guy who was David Paxson, who is the president and founder of World Population Balance, and we started a friendship, and I became an advisor on his board, and then all of the talks, I became a speaker for World Population Balance, and then finally it sort of culminated in writing the book published by Free Thought House Press last year called Move Upstream, A Call to Solve Overpopulation. And I have done many speeches. The more I get into this issue, the more I realize and recognize that it is just key to unlocking the door to solve the problems we think we want to solve. And I say think we want to solve because I just don't feel that we really want to solve problems very much, because we don't seem to want to deal with the source of them. So my journey has been one from 10th grade on to, I still do a lot of downstream things. I still recycle. I'm still a vegan. I'm still a composter. And I'm still a gardener. But it's not enough until we deal with the ultimate issue of overpopulation.
So I think we all know what you mean by calling to solve overpopulation. But what does the phrase "to move upstream" mean in the context of the book?
To move upstream to me is it's a metaphor. I'm from the beautiful state of the beautiful overpopulated state of Minnesota, and we have the head of the Mississippi River in our state, in Itasca State Park, our oldest state park, and in that little tiny trickle is the beginning of the mighty Mississippi River, one of the major rivers of the world. And if you want to start to do something, you need to start when the trickle is small and when the problems are small and where they begin. Downstream is when you have a raging river. Now you're trying to stop something, and it's very hard to stop a raging river, if not impossible. And so the metaphor is to move upstream is to say, what is the source of the problem? For example, if there were 10 people drinking from a well and they were doing fine, but they weren't maybe living as long as we think they should live. So we come in and we say, hey, we're going to solve your health care problems, and they multiply, and now there's 20 people that are drinking from a well that was only really able to support 10. So then we say, well, let's go dig the well deeper. And we ignore that now there's 40 people trying to drink from this well. And so the upstream thing is, we needed to control how many people were drinking from the well, not to keep digging the well deeper. And upstream is a holistic look at both human numbers and consumption. But at a certain point, it really isn't about consumption to me, because I think about, I've got the U.S. population, world population clock in front of me, and I'm looking at it just going up by 9,000 people per hour globally, and going, what could I do as a consumer or non-consumer that would go against that? So moving upstream is seeing that total picture in order to be able to solve a problem.
For those who see the topic of overpopulation as taboo and instead keep the focus on downstream symptoms, what are the various forms of denial you encounter?
Well, the Denial is, as Sam Harris might say, the author and of a new book called The Moral Landscape I'm reading right now, he would say it is a delusion of galloping proportions that people live in. I think it's what I have witnessed is people saying, they told me things like, "Don't worry, Karen, we're going to invent these fuel cells that are going to be in everybody's home, and it will power everything. And don't worry." They always tell me not to worry, don't worry. And I say, no, okay, so that might solve one of the problems we have. Energy is certainly the problem, running out of energy. But it doesn't solve the problem of water. It doesn't solve the problem of wildlife. It doesn't solve the problem of overcrowdedness. It doesn't solve the problem of not enough jobs. All the things that overpopulation is responsible for, people want to throw very small solutions at them, and they're very small. For example, they'll say, "Aren't you excited? We banned plastic bags in San Francisco or something." And I'll say, it's a good step. It's just not going to be enough. So I think the downstream ideas, it's not that they're bad. I don't want to give that impression that I think that to do something downstream, like making sure you take your Tupperware to a restaurant to make sure you don't use that one plastic thing that they're going to give you that you're going to have to throw away, is a bad thing. It's just not enough people are doing that, number one, and we need a systemic change, a real narrative change, because the delusion we're living under is a delusion that we have limitless resources and that the only thing we have to change is how we use those resources. We do not have limitless resources. This is a closed system. As a naturalist, that's what I teach. This world is a closed system, and we've been putting carbon into it without a release valve, and so therefore we're damaging our own territory. We're damaging our own air and our own water, and we're doing it collectively, not only by our modern ways, but how many people use those modern ways. So the modern ways are really being, I think, addressed pretty well, but why aren't we being successful? We're talking about climate change a lot. Why aren't we being successful? We're not talking about the numbers side. And that's what I'm here to open up the door to that conversation and give it permission to be discussed. Maybe that's all I can hope for, but at least I'm going to do that.
We live in a global system, and many see no relevance in land borders. What impact, if any, does immigration have as regards population?
Well, immigration has a huge impact, especially in the United States. I mean, if you have especially in Europe where you have stable populations, or even maybe, negative growth, which is a very weird concept, but immigration is where growth comes from. But I really think immigration needs to be, again, it's a subset, it's a downstream effect of overpopulation. If you have, take a country like Syria, and you had people living well in the rural areas of Syria, and then you have overpopulation-inspired climate change, which affects areas of desert, disproportionately, and so they have a huge drought. So everyone moves into the city, and the city, you have all these. The city can't handle it. The city's become way overpopulated in Syria, and then Syria develops, complete societal breakdown, because they don't have enough food, they don't have enough water, they don't have enough jobs, and you have chaos, you have war, and you have people just disintegrating into this too many rats in the rat cage situation, and then they start jumping into boats and doing desperate things, and then it becomes Europe's problem. So it is not an immigration problem as a separate bubble. It is an effect, a side effect of overpopulation, and that we are not able to understand as a cultural narrative that there are just so many people that cities can handle, so many, because we have limited water supplies, we have limited space, we have limited the idea that we can solve our traffic problems, for example, with bigger roads. It's the same idea that we can solve immigration just by being kinder, opening up our hearts, opening up our doors, because we love people, and we love, we're not racist, and we want to open up our doors. And how really open are those doors? Bindi Irwin, I quote her in my book, and she said in her essay that she wrote as an environmental essay, she said, overpopulation and immigration issues are like having 15 cupcakes and 15 party favors and 75 people show up. And so I think it's we have to take this upstream. It's a great metaphor, I think, for having the conversation about immigration, to say we love immigrants, but immigration is going to destroy our country, because just like overpopulation destroyed your country, the solutions have to become way before something becomes a failed state and people start jumping into boats in desperation to have a life. It is not the immigrants' fault. There's nothing, empirically wrong with them trying to have a good. We'd all do that. There for the grace of whoever, so I, right?
Mm.
So I think it's just a playing field I want to see the conversation happen on. I'd like to see Britain and Germany and everybody look and assess their resources. What kind of quality of life do you want to have, and how many people can you really allow in and keep that quality of life?
I was going to say that if they take this first wave of immigrants, all the refugee crises of the future, they won't be able to take those ones because they will have filled up on the first guy.
Well, my question is, can you even take them now? My question is, have you evaluated your water resources? Have you evaluated your food supplies? Have you evaluated your job situations? And have you actually asked the people that come in to have one child, so that you're not bringing in your own population problem with people who culturally are predisposed to have 4, 5, 6 children? That seems to be a very politically incorrect thing to even request, but I think it's incredibly ecologically sound.
Yeah, in the UK, we currently import 40% of our food at the moment. We're not able to, the London alone takes up all our resources. We're not currently able to have, to provide enough food for those of us who are already here. So we really need to look at that.
Exactly. So you're in an overpopulation state before you bring in one refugee. How many people in the UK think of yourselves as overpopulated relative to your resources? How many people see that? And that's the thing that I think is so important.
Yes.
Is that we actually already say we're full, we're overfull before we even add one refugee into our mess.
And we haven't even added in ecological overshoot, which of course all the European countries would be because of their rates of consumption per person.
Correct. The question is how do we bring the national conversation into what I would call a racially neutral zone, which means they're going to say anything we say is racially motivated, and it's so not true. It's so not true. It's all about caring for everybody and saying we're bringing you into a situation that's already over its limits, and it's very hard for people to see that. You have to really keep focused on the narrative change. The narrative change is you are looking at being on an island, and an island with limited resources, and you're asking it to support more. At what sacrifice? At what? I think I think unfortunately the people who get it at some intuitive level respond in a racist way, and then they attach themselves to our issue, and then they bring us down, and that's unfortunate.
Well, in the case of the UK, births exceeding deaths is almost half of the growth annually as well, so we're not one of those countries which has a steady or lowering birth rate. Correct.
But the whole idea of my book is to just look at the whole Earth as a limited place where we are trying to solve problems caused by overpopulation by not even addressing overpopulation. It's that whole elephant in the room thing. We keep picking up broken lamps, and we don't get rid of the elephant, and so every day we have to pick up another broken lamp and try to fix it. And we might want to consider that there's this elephant in the room that keeps breaking the lamps. So I like to speak in metaphor, as you can probably tell. But I mean, it's much of a change. And people live in their own small world. I understand that. I get it. But if you want to decrease suffering, if you want to decrease suffering and you want to increase human well-being, you have to look at the relationship between growth and diminishing resources, and that's where suffering lies. And we have to, I think, keep focused on that and just dismiss all these accusations which are not founded.
Empowering women is often given as the fix-all approach to solving overpopulation. Do you share this view?
Well, I've been a feminist ever since I had a poster in my dorm room that said, "A woman without a man is like a fish without a bicycle." I don't know if you've ever heard of that one in the UK, but it was quite popular back in my day. And empowering women is a great, great thing to do. However, the important thing to realize is that we've been trying to empower women for a really long time, and if we just put our energy on that, I don't think we'll be successful in time. We are in a crisis. And empowering women has to transcend all these ancient religious narratives about women as second and third class citizens. And I was just in China in May, and I saw the result of incredible efforts to empower women. I was part of a women's institute, and it's all good efforts. I'm very much in favor of being a part of that. But I believe that it is about empowering the narrative that says we are overpopulated and we're going to do something about it for the future of our population. And therefore, we are going to give access to birth control, and we're going to not diminish women for if they didn't have a boy or all this kind of thing. So I think the better, more immediate solution, and it's been working in countries like Thailand, countries like Iran. It's been working. We have successes we can point to where we change the narrative, and then all of a sudden, when Iran decided it had too many people after the war, it had excess of people and not enough resources, they immediately made sure that birth control was available in the rural areas and brought down the population very quickly. So in some cases, the government has to get involved. In some cases, the clergy has to get involved. It'd be great if they all got involved from a compassionate standpoint, because that's what it really is. We're often, if they throw the race card at us, the next card they throw at us is, we're into genocide. We're into eugenics because we're into population control. I said, no, nature is well on its way to doing that. If we're pulling back at nature's trajectory, it's from a compassionate perspective. It is not from anything other, because all we have to do is cross our hands and just watch us go over the cliff, and that will be very, very, very evil, and we don't want to go that direction. That's why those of us who work on this issue are working so hard on it, because we see the writing on the wall. So I think women's empowerment is so important, but that will come after a culture has decided that it's incredibly important to do this. One of the examples in my book in Thailand is the idea that the one man, I always mangle his name, Nichai Verivalda, was so and is so involved in making sure that everyone had access to condoms. Everyone had understanding of that smaller families would be better for everybody, and change the culture and save like 9 million births. And Thailand isn't perfect. It doesn't mean every problem has been solved, but so many were solved because of his efforts. So it can all be done, and it needs to be. Women will have to have unfettered access to birth control for sure. It'll have to be. But once everybody starts saying, "Hey, we're going to run out of everything," you need to get a vasectomy. You need to use condoms. You need to have one child. All those things are a remedy. They're not a curse. And so we have to flip around the story before we have to worry about the details. When I watch commercials in this country, I don't know if it's bad in yours, but it's all about buy the bigger car and get the bigger house and buy the bigger boat and eat this horrible food. And we're just being billions of dollars are spent on that old narrative of that the earth can handle your just insatiable appetite for stuff. So when you hear that all the time, you just think, oh, there must be plenty. I can go out and have my third kid, my fourth kid. And I think that that's much more important, because empowerment will come after we get this.
1985 saw the Live Aid in the UK and USA for Africa in America to help with the Ethiopian starvation.
Right.
Since that point, their population has doubled. How can charities operate responsibly with long-term sustainability in mind?
You have to couple with population groups. If you feed my starving children, you get more starving children. In my book, I mentioned a friend of ours went to Darfur and during their big, huge starvation crisis, and I said, who's your average person? And he said, a woman and her 4 children. And he said, you give them a card, and then at 2 in the morning, they get their meal. And I said, and what did you do about birth control and giving them birth control? And he said, oh, that wasn't our issue. I said, well, then next year you better find some more food, because she's going to come back with that 5th child. And we have to have those organizations who are, Bread for the World, Water for the World. All these organizations are just, they're very well intended and very, very, I think they do more damage than they do good, because they think that by feeding a child today without dealing with how many people there are, they've done something long-term good, when they actually imperiled these people, because now they're well enough to continue having more children, and the food supply is not there, the water supply is not there, the forests are not there for them. So I think it's extremely important that Bread for the World and Feed My Starving Children, all these very well-intended downstream groups, merge with groups like Population Matters, with groups like Population Media Center, with so many groups out there who'd be very willing to work with culturally respectful groups and ways to help people truly solve their problems and not just be a Band-Aid.
You mentioned Sam Harris earlier. I was listening to his podcast today, his latest podcast, and they were discussing Peter Singer's effective altruism movement. And the entire focus of it seems to be like malaria nets and feeding, like you say, but there was no mention of contraception or anything like that.
Right. Again, I think part of this is, I think intuitively people understand that if too many people are drinking from the well's going to go dry. I think people get that. I just don't think they feel it's their right, their political right to tell people how many children they can have. There's something about that decision, which is often from a woman's empowerment perspective, not really their decision. It's like, oh, yes, I wanted my 7th child because I was only walking 3 miles for water anyway. Maybe I'll walk 4 miles for water. Usually not the women's decision that they want to. But as I mentioned about the Clinton group, the Kotak group, that in Malawi, in my book, I mentioned that they are doing this. They're doing a carbon sink kind of approach, which sounds so great. They're planting trees and giving people money, and this money is coming from corporations that are otherwise polluting, but they're not. It's one of the fastest growing sub-Saharan countries, and everyone says they want to bring, a good life to all these people, and it's impossible. We just cannot do that. And I also think that people don't want to think of the earth as limited. We've got in our country, we've got the manifest destiny sort of narrative that, we are out to conquer, we're out to explore new worlds, and they're all going to provide for us. I had someone at a meeting say, well, how about going to Mars? I said, really? Do we have a right to destroy another planet? I mean, it would just be able to see ourselves as part of the web of life, to go back to an indigenous perspective. I think that's our only hope, I think, is to understand that it's great to want to help people, but you have to help them long term.
I was going to say collapsing civilizations don't tend to innovate technologically enough to make Mars settling possible even.
Right. Well, I just think it's more morally reprehensible to think that we should go and destroy another planet.
Yes.
But then we'd have to get 78 million people there a year just to take rid of our growth, wouldn't we?
Yes, there's the Kenneth Boulding quote about only economists and madmen believe in infinite growth. And
Yes.
there's been a lot of feedback to that end regarding that. You probably saw that bioethicist article recently where he said, is it right to give birth in the era of climate change? There's been so many articles in response to him. Like, I've seen 10 articles where they're all just saying, no, we need to keep growing because it's the best way of finding innovations, and somewhat the next child that's born could come up with the magical cure.
Yes. Well, again, it's galloping delusion. It's just going at lightning speed, warp speed toward the cliff, because that it's just a weak argument. If we had another Einstein born today, and you aborted that Einstein, wouldn't that just be a horrible thing? I said, horrible compared to what? How about horrible compared to, an entire village running out of water? No, it's not horrible, because an Einstein couldn't reinvent that water. The other thing that I think we have to break this idea out is just because we have been incredibly capable of building rockets to the moon and all kinds of things that are impressive on some level, but they take an awful lot of resources, and these are limited things. These are limited, basically these are dead dinosaurs that we're putting in the rocket fuel, and we don't like to think of limits. The way I like to parse it out is I could say we can have unlimited love, unlimited compassion. We cannot have unlimited water, unlimited tin, unlimited titanium, all the things that we depend on today. In the book Scarcity, the author said that we depend on about over 89 limited resources, whereas decades ago it was 15. So not only are we growing in our numbers, we're growing in our dependency on more and more limited resources and becoming more and more of a throwaway society. It's all built in. You better get rid of that phone because a new one's been invented. You better get rid of that computer and that printer because, we just invented a brand new one. So we have built into our system waste under the idea that the almighty dollar and the bottom line is our goal. And unless we change those goals, the Earth is going to just say, okay, we're done with this species. We are just done with you. We have not behaved well at all.
Stop it too is a common mantra in environmental groups, dating back to about the 60s and 70s, as a slow way of turning around population issues. What are your thoughts on this as a mantra for the overpopulation movement?
Well, Stop It Too used to work. If we would have listened to it several decades ago, Stop It Too right now will send us to 9 billion. We are 5.5 billion overpopulated relative to our resources, according to the people who know them more than me. The Ecological Footprint Network, for example, measures us at, depending on what lifestyle, we should be at about 1.5 billion. Well, then if you stopped at 2, you would be able to keep things flatlined. When you stop now at 2, because we have what they call population momentum, and the populations meaning the median ages of children in younger countries that have the higher potential of having children, we will go to 9 billion. So we're going to add 2 billion by stopping at 2.
And that's if everybody signed up.
And that's if everybody signed up. So it's quite daunting to say, oh my goodness, if we just have 2 children, which people still today believe, they come to me, oh, I only had 2 kids, and I just go, well, that was great back then. Now it's not great anymore. Why? Mathematically, we have to look at the math here. That keeps us growing. What keeps us going down is 1 child or 0 child. Now then, there's some people have calculated this out, that by the year 2100 we are going to be, we could be at possibly at 3 billion, which would be so much better than 9 billion. Think of that. 6 billion less people needing water, resources, and so on. Now, if you're an economist and you go, who's going to buy all the products? You go, well, the people can't buy them when they're dead of starvation. And I always say, you've got, again, move it upstream and see that people who have no water and no food and no way of growing it in a climate chaos world are going to be able to buy your product that was made by cheap labor in China.
I think Paul Ehrlich said something to the effect of all causes are a lost cause on a overpopulated planet.
Well, exactly. I mean, we're eating our seed corn. What is it, August 8th or so on was Overshoot Day. So right now, everything we've produced in this year, we've already eaten up. And now we're basically going after the seed corn. We're going after the original stuff. We're drinking water that was produced 300 to 5,000 years ago right here in the Minneapolis area where I live. But I'll just tell you a quick story of something that I participated in. My local city wanted me to participate in a futuring of our city, and I said, no, you don't. They said, no, we really want you to be there, Karen. And I said, no, you don't. I didn't know what I was going to say. But the idea was, what are you worried about 20 years from now? And they went around the room, and, people were worried about things like not enough art in the community and not enough homes for the homeless, et cetera, et cetera. And I said, I didn't know what I was going to say. And I said, I am the Lorax, and I speak for the trees. And I'm concerned that we will not have the water we're already overpumping the aquifer. Our particular city does pump just groundwater. And I said, we're already overpumping that. 20 years from now, I don't think the water will be there. And the next person said, well, that may be true, but I'm really concerned about having enough drama teachers in the schools. And that was the next person, and I just left and went kayaking and said, no, I'm done with this. But, that's the level of engagement. People want to be able to do something, and I tell them, then you have to talk about the overpopulation numbers. They should be at your fingertips. 9,000 people per hour, 1 million people every 4.5 days, and about 78 million are added to our planet every year in overshoot. And how are you going to solve the world's problems when that's the case? And keep those at your fingertips. People just guffaw when I say those numbers. I said, why isn't that being taught by every single environmental group that's out there? Because they want money from their supporters.
And all those downstream issues that they're concerned with could be tied back to overpopulation as well. Yeah, so you just mentioned it there. The green organisations seem to be neglecting to give overpopulation its due focus. Why is this, and are there any exceptions?
Oh, there have been some exceptions. I think the Center for Biological Diversity has had their Endangered Species Condom Project. Are you familiar with that?
Yes.
That I thought those were great. Wrap with care, save the polar bear. Some of their mantras. They had a really good. I think the Isaac Walton League has a good population policy, but I guess none of the groups that I would call green groups have done it to the degree I think they need to. In other words, yes, we have a population group, like Audubon has a population page on their website that you can go and dig for if you want to. But then they spend most of their time talking about this endangered bird in South America, and can't you please send your dollars, and we'll send you this little cute bag. So the message that people get is, I sent my money to Audubon, I helped save this endangered species, I've done my green thing. So I think our bandwidth is so small when it comes to green issues, and they fill it up with the noise of downstream acts. So another friend of mine, very avid member of Greenpeace, and I said, do you know the population numbers? He said, no. I said, no, that's not your fault. That's Greenpeace's fault. Greenpeace has not, that magazine they send you every month, the emails that you get, they're not telling you the story of overpopulation. They're telling you the story of fighting the whalers, the Japanese whalers, and they're telling you the stories of fighting all the downstream things that they do, which is a result of overpopulation, especially in areas of the rainforest. I've been a rainforest advocate ever since I went there in the late 80s. But realize soon that with populations growing, you're not going to save the rainforest. And they don't want that as their, I don't think they want that as in anywhere near their literature. And the reason they don't is because it seems so overwhelming that why would people send the money if they can't solve the problem? So people want to have you, I'll write you a check. They tell us this at World Population Balance a lot. They say, what are you doing? I'll write you a check, but I want to know you're doing something. And people want a very tangible thing. So if you say, look, I gave you a little stuffed snow leopard, then you can feel you've done something to save the snow leopard. So I think it's both. They're trying to survive, which I understand, but they're really concerned about their mission statement. They will put a world population clock on their websites and inform people of how dire a situation we're in. And I think we sometimes just think, well, we'll solve it piecemeal, and they will not. I've been to Costa Rica now 11 times, and every time I go, I see less rainforest and more. This last time, I went to the ocean, and I couldn't see a single fish because of all the development that's going on and all the runoff and everything. My own lake at home, where I like to paddleboard, is much clearer than the ocean was in Costa Rica. But, it's touted as being such a biologically diverse area. I've seen it go downhill because of overpopulation. So I think that there are, I hope I answer your question, that there are some bright lights there, but not nearly enough. One experiment we did here in Minnesota, we looked up 74 environmental groups, and we wrote an individual letter to each saying, we thank you for what you're doing, water, clean water action, or whatever it was. But you don't have a message about overpopulation. We don't think you can accomplish your own mission unless you deal with this. And we'd be willing to sit down with you at no charge to go through your mission statement and see how we could better merge our interests. I want to ask you how many people you think responded to that.
2?
Yeah.
That
5.
would be 0.
So,
Actually, -1, because one person did respond, at least have the courtesy of a response, and say, oh, overpopulation isn't a problem. So I think my answer is we had a -1 response from that. So that, I hope, answers your question about how deeply in denial our own quote-unquote green organizations are. We have the Green Party. I just spoke to the Green Party of St. Paul and said, your own representative doesn't have anywhere on her website. Jill Stein is running for president of our country under the Green Party mantra, and I don't see anything green about not talking about overpopulation.
No, we have the ex-leader of the Green Party in the UK, Natalie Bennett, actually downplayed, almost basically denied overpopulation. And we are Green Party members or supporters, and we've found there's almost more antagonism towards the issue of overpopulation amongst Green Party members than there is in the general public.
Then we have to start calling the Brown Party or something. I mean, we really have to fight that back, because we don't have to get in the weeds of politics here, but if you're going to have an alternative to somebody and you say because they're so green, show me how green they are. They have to take on this issue, or I think it's offensive. It's offensive to me to call yourself green if you don't see overpopulation as the cause of so many environmental problems.
Do you think there is any hope looking to politicians for this issue? Wouldn't a public...
I don't look for politicians as a hopeful sign. That's why I called the political chapter the shortest chapter. I think politicians they put their finger in the air and they respond to what they think the public will support them, which to me is not true leadership. True leadership is to carve out the vision, inform the public, say why this is something you need to support me on. That's a true leader. But a politician is going to put their finger in the air and say, oh, that's popular. I'll go build a stadium and charge the taxpayer the money for it and make them think it's a good idea and give all the money to the people who are going to make money on the tickets. I mean, that's what politicians do. Politicians are not there to lead. A good leader would just say, hey, this is, and look what in our country it happened to Jimmy Carter. He said, you need to put on your sweater you need to turn down your thermostat, and nobody liked hearing that, so we got Reagan in next. I mean, it's like a lot of people don't want to hear that kind of truthfulness. So I understand that. I think the hope lies in, you always have to be hopeful, but, if you're going to recycle, if you're going to do downstream things, to me, you're hopeful. Why spend your last remaining days washing out jars of ketchup to recycle them if you don't think there's hope? So I do think people are hopeful, and I live in the possibility that it can happen. I think it's non-probable, but, I don't want to become one of those people that are just, I'm not sounding the alarm just to wake people up before they go over the cliff. I'm trying to sound the alarm so that people can wake up and not go over the cliff. So I do think that when enough people get this issue, the politicians will respond.